Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So we're just after the reveal. It's in the morning and it's about 6:42, so I thought I'd go through the patch notes and drill in, and they're actually pretty good patch notes for 3.2. And I'm going to explain as I roll through. So some of these where we've covered off on manifestos, I'm not going to dig into too much because there's a fair bit going on in the 3.2 patch notes. So obviously, just sort of going down, the new league is a roguelike sort of league. If you watch the reveal, basically it sort of plays like you reveal rooms as you go through. It plays like Hades, if anyone's ever played that game, and then you basically can't really die in the mechanic. So it's sort of based around hardcore players having accessibility. But yeah, the new league mechanic looks really cool. But going down into the patch notes specifically, so obviously the Forbidden Sanctum is now in the game from 3.20. New content and features. So we won't go into anything crazily here. We did get a new skill gem, so Volcanic Fissure. Now, in thinking about this, I would actually probably say that playing Chieftain Slam totems with Volcanic Fissure is going to be the way to go. And then running a Brutus Lead Sprinkler and strength stacking build to max out fire damage will probably end up being the best way to scale it up. But when we get the changes to the path of building, then we'll play with that and potentially we can put something together that'll make that work. New intelligence support gem, which is curse grounds, so curses or hexes can now curse ground on enemies, so that's really cool, and potentially some really interesting stuff can come out of that. Then we've got Hex Bloom, which is a new support skill. So hexes from supported skills are transferred to all enemies within a certain distance of when a hexed enemy dies. Not sure what we'd use that for yet, but you know, somebody will think of something. Really interestingly, Val skills have been buffed, and there have been pretty significant buffs to melee, and we'll dig into that below because they've actually done a really good job with trying to up the power, though melee still needs work. The game is moving in the right direction from what I can see, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So new Val skills. I noticed they featured Cleave and Flicker Strike, but we now have Blade Flurry, Venom Gyre, Val Molten Strike, Caustic Arrow, Volcanic Fissure. So that seems really crazy that there's a Val skill for that, and Val Smite, whatever that might be, taking the form of, but Smite's already pretty powerful with armor stacking, so that could be really cool. We are getting fracturing orbs moving forwards, which means that making +1 wands and amulets is going to get a hell of a lot easier. These can be target farmed from what I can see from Harbinger in particular. So that's going to be really interesting because we're going to be able to fracture items a lot more efficiently. They've added in fracturing shards. Now there's 15 new unique items, but I'm actually more interested in the changes to the existing uniques, which is pretty significant. Then obviously the usual stuff they add in. Calandra Touch unique ring is in the core drop pool. Where that's going to drop, got no idea, but we'll find out. Now we've already spoken about altar changes in a previous video. Basically they're just sort of gearing altars, or atlas changes, sorry, altar changes are further down. So every league they sort of retool the map. The biggest change here being Maven Witness bosses in maps, not in invitations. In maps now can have a chance to drop awaken gems, which I think is really cool, and this includes like the awakened, like enhance or awaken and lighten. They'll all be available from what we can see here, which are the sort of the exclusive Maven gem drops, if you want to call them that. So the usual rotations, they've just sort of removed maps and then subbed them out for old maps to keep the pool down. I've got no issues with these. Like I like some of these maps. Spider Lair, Iceberg, I do like, and I think that wasn't in last league. Coves is really good. Burial Chamber is back. So we can smash some burial chambers, and hopefully there's a good probability for doctor cards in there again. Anyway, rolling down further. Without going into too much detail, Archnem's been removed from the game. And we now have like a more abridged system of what it used to be. And per the Q&A, it appears that it's going to be easier, which is good. We're not going to have like those multi-stacking mods where enemies are just absolutely impossible to kill and you just have to leave the game and come back and reset your instances and stuff like that. Which, for anyone who follows my channel, that means Delver's fucking 2 thumbs up this league. So Delver's going to be a hell of a lot more fun, and we'll be able to push down a lot lower without getting absolutely faced every time by complete bullshit mods. Hopefully, like, was it Lightning Pylon and stuff like that's been nerfed to shit as well. But anyway, this is all really good. Now, apparently there are more mods in the game moving forward. So if you're running Headhunter at the upper end, your belt mods and your mod stacking is going to be a lot more efficient. At the lower end, you're going to be worse off. But as you wean up in power, you're going to do a lot better. Moving down further, Eldritch Altars. This was covered in a previous video. Basically, they have changed Eldritch Altars, so the rewards are a lot more consistent as far as things like currency and whatnot. But yeah, I don't think that they've reduced monster packs, things like that, to sort of balance it out a bit better. I don't think it's a bad change. Some people might. It's sort of a nerf, sort of not a nerf. But the fact that we're getting buffed up Maven encounters and maps, and that's more of an incentive, is pretty cool. Also, the changes where, you know, scarabs aren't going to be so contingent on altars, and you'll be able to get access to scarabs and then do the 3-to-1 trade ratio. That seems really cool as well. So just rolling down beyond that, Atlas Tree. So the Atlas Tree is getting reworked. And what we basically found is they're removing where there's like targetable boss nodes. So where, for example, we're Guardians, you can dupe the Guardians and have 2 Guardians spawn or a second Guardian spawn in like Shaper infused maps, or Guardian encounters, sorry. That's not going to be a thing anymore because they're sort of focusing on, you can do as many bosses as you could before, but the overall impact of the Atlas is going to be in every piece of content that you do throughout the league encounters and bossing and everything. So it's not going to be so like having to respec your tree to do bossing or anything like that, unless you're going to do like Ubers, for example, which I think this is a really good change. And actually probably is going to be much more profitable from a currency generation standpoint and more consistent. You're not going to have to like constantly switch your tree out, so you can really spec into the things that you want to specialize from a league mechanic standpoint. Duels and ailment mitigations. So what we can see here is they've added a whole heap of new suffixes that can come on random duels, so reduce ailments. So it's going to be a lot easier, for example, to get poison reduction and bleed reduction and deal with ailments as an overall. Chance to avoid being ignited, chilled, frozen, shocked, poison, bleeding, stunned. Corruption on duels can no longer roll. These have been replaced by the following modifiers. So it's basically going away from avoidance and moving more to reduction of effect. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It also looks like they've buffed up the avoidance where available on Abyss duels. So these stats are looking like they're targeted on regular duels as opposed to Abyss duels, which have avoidance stats on them, and they've buffed that up to anywhere up to 50%. So realistically, you could get a high roll, 2 high roll Abyss duels and be completely avoidant, completely able to avoid bleed or poison, for example, and then you could just have shock immunity and then ignite immunity, or reduction and burn immunity through the Aberith Pantheon. So you could just like fully mitigate ailments without having to do huge levels of investment. And I think that that's a really good way forwards, because the game was just getting so cumbersome with things trying to kill you. This is giving us some really good defensive layers, and I really like that. Okay. So they're going, many unique duels are not exciting to find. There are a few reasons for this. Most cases are simply underpowered. There are also many corruption-only duels that don't fulfill a good purpose. Previously, we were hesitant to revisit unique duels and improve them beyond their initial designs. So it looks like they're just making changes here, and I think they had this in the manifesto about the availability of different duels. So we're making it so that every unique jewel that drops is very rare and highly desirable. So this means many unique existing unique jewels have been removed from the drop pool. The intention is so that when you find a unique jewel, it's almost a very positive experience. So they are making it harder to get certain jewels, and this may make it actually harder to do certain build defining mechanics like golems potentially. So that's something that we're going to have to look at. The availability of existing unique jewels has been reviewed, and many, including replica versions, can no longer be obtained. Interesting. The following existing jewels are able to be found as item drops: Inspired Learning, Intuitive Leap, Lionized Fall, Might of the Meek, Pure Talent, Unending Hunger, and Unnatural Instinct. The following unique jewels can only be obtained as corruption outcomes, so brute force, so that's for strength stacking, efficient training, energized armor, fragility, healthy mind, hidden potential, inertia, seething fury, so that's going to affect Syra shards and shield crush builds, self-flagellation, 2 dust, that's going to affect your ward loop builds. So it just looks like replica primordial might and replica reckless defense are the only replica jewels that are able to be obtained. Really? Okay, so primordial might, harmony, and eminence are no longer in the core drop pool and are now found from other more deterministic sources, so target farmable from what I can see here. Added 6 new vendor recipes for Dead Reckoning, Endless Misery, Spirit Guards, and 3 combat focus unique jewels. So we're gonna have to figure that out. Okay, yeah, look, I don't necessarily like that change per se, but hey, whatever. It's only jewels. We can work around that. And, you know, it does add a bit more value for them as well. So, you know, makes it more fun to achieve. And I'm sure we'll figure that out. So they are doing some buffing here from lab enchants. So it looks like Spark and Ethereal Knives can now be shot in a circle. Oh no. The Spark Projectile Speed and Helmet Enchantments and Ethereal Knife Pierce Helmet Enchantment have been removed for this purpose. Frostblades now has 110% effectiveness at level 1, scaling up to 225. So Frostblades has actually been buffed, which is pretty cool. Okay, yeah, nothing else there that really need to worry about. Okay, our goal is finding unique jewels, exciting experience. Unique jewels that drop naturally should be those that are very valuable. Yeah, okay. Okay, so no unique jewels during leveling up in the campaign anymore. I can live with that. So with curses, obviously we know what's happened. They've removed Doom. And the big take home here is actually what they've done to buff curses. So Doom only really affects you if you're worried about it and you played Hex Blast characters, and not many people play that, so we're not going to worry about that. Whispers of Doom notable, continues to give you an additional curse, and has much wider selection of passives within its wheel now, which is pretty cool. The last right's notable. Curse enemies are destroyed. Again, not too worried about that. These notables aren't too. So there are going to be tree changes, but they're not in like perverse ways or anything like that. Yep, nothing crazy there. So just some changes to the curse notable. Okay. Yep, Hex Blast no longer has any Doom related to stats. That's fine. So how they scale that up? Yeah, so they've scaled Doom Blast up significantly. It has 370% damage effectiveness from 200%. So they just flat scaled the skill, and that's fine. That is compensating. That could actually be quite ridiculously powered this league. Until we test it, we won't know. So they buffed up Heretic's Veil, Cosbury Will, unique body armor, that's been buffed as well pretty significantly. Just going down further. None of these really, I'm not really too worried about all of this. This is all pretty okay. Yep. Again, they're just sort of rescaling hexes and curses. So punishment, this looks like it has been nerfed actually. Yeah, so that's been nerfed a little bit. Moving down. Yeah, it looks like they nerfed the overall because of the changes to hexes and curses. Looks like they've just nerfed the percentage, you know, damage rates, if you want to call it that, to the overall curse skills. So that's fine. That's not by significant margins either. Like, you know, less than 8%. It's not huge, so we can live with that. And I know that moving forwards, rings and things like that don't have an effectiveness percentage. It simply just applies the curse as it did previously, or the hex, which is how it was before they introduced all the doom mechanics and everything into the game. So just rolling down here, you could get bogged down on this stuff. None of this is really too significant. Okay, this is where it's big because I'm playing an occultist as my league starter. So the occultist profane bloom notable ascendancy passive no longer has your hexes no longer affect hexproof enemies, but it's actually increased the minion chance to explode up to 50% from 40%. So it's been sort of buffed with the high probability of enemies exploding in maps, which is pretty good. And then malediction's been moved has been moved and repurposed as a notable on the passive tree, and been named to unholy authority. No longer provides 15% increased effective curses. Like, I'm not bothered by that at all. I don't think that's a huge issue. And now the ascendancy for the occultist is now going to give you your hexes can affect hex-proof enemies, which used to sit in the profane bloom notable ascendancy. And that's not a bad change because, to be honest with you, occultist is ridiculously powerful and one of the most played build archetypes every single league. Now, the other thing too is temporal changes and enfeeble are getting a huge, well, you know, somewhat of a huge buff. So with all the changes to curses, one of the new defensive layers I'm going to recommend moving forwards is a blasphemy and feeble setup, which actually played in the Delve, the Endless Delve league, and it was friggin' powerful as all hell as a damage mitigation tool. So I think that that's actually going to be a goal moving forwards. And it looks like, yeah, they've literally just dropped its high-end effectiveness by 1% at level 20. So that's literally no real nerf at all to enfeeble itself, and you know, curse or hex skills have been buffed passively anyway from the changes, so this is just balancing it back out. Same with temporal chains. Temporal chains is not even being changed at the high end, so temporal chains and enfeeble are actually going to be really viable. Not only that, they have a much greater effect on map bosses and on pinnacle bosses now, so you're basically getting less effect on like pack mobs and monsters. So in particular, like for delvers, enfeeble is just going to be a huge damage reduction tool along with shitloads of armor and max block. And if you're going true block, you know, theoretically you're almost unkillable. You just won't take any physical or spell damage, which is really good if you're playing like Vortex Occultist. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. That's probably what I'll be playing this league. Anyway, moving down further. So, yeah, and they've adjusted vulnerability and despair. And the way that they operate is a little bit different to how they originally did, but, you know, no real significant impact there. I think, and overall, I agree with them. Hexes look to be a lot stronger than what they were because they've completely adjusted the mechanic to sort of go in that way. And they've really debuffed enemies as opposed to, or taken away defense from enemies, as opposed to just flat buff the skill and then keep rising the power creep on the enemies to make them harder and harder. And I think that's a good way to go about it because it gives more power to the player, makes it a hell of a lot easier to survive and play, you know, just do boss fights in general. Endgame unique items, This is where our melee buffs start to come in, and this was what really had my attention. So Atziri's Disfavor has just had a huge flat damage increase up to a high point of 370 to 390 from like 270 high cap, which is fucking huge. Plus 10 to weapon range, again, huge. You know, that's going to give us a huge amount of upside damage. Beano's Kitchen Knife has been buffed, but to be honest with you, like, nobody really plays with unique daggers. I'm not sure what use purpose that could have from a melee side, but you know, where there's a way, there's a will. The Bloodseeker Unique Claw has been buffed, not significantly, but you know, by enough. Actually, the flat fizz damage is actually pretty good. Divinaris has been buffed as well. Kingmaker, the question that came up in the Q&A, so they've just done flatline buff up to 360% from 240% high point damage, so that's pretty fucking significant. Kitava's Feast, which I think does like bone spears when you kill enemies, now has Socketed Gems as supported by level 30 melee splash. Was level 25. This effect, oh no, this is the huge mace, sorry, I'm thinking of a different item. So that's a lot more power, and that means it's a pretty good technical 7 link. And not only that, you can get splash on the tree now, and we'll talk about that very soon. Lionized Glare's been buffed as well by double. So bow builds using that, it's actually going to be viable. Marui Ariki Unique Mace, or Ariki Unique Mace, that already like benched up to like 700 DPS on the item itself, though the item itself was a bit hindered by its attack speed reduction, like its down point. So that's been buffed up to 600% high point, which might get it like well over 1,000 to maybe 1,100 DPS or whatever it is. So I think it was like, it got as high as like 800, 850 DPS, something like that. So potentially this is a huge buff, but the use case of that's going to be really interesting. The Savior has been straight up buffed to 150% additional damage high point from 50%, so 100% increase, which is really good. Soul Taker buffed again. Even just the flat damage on it actually makes it a viable item to use with like bloody Lacerate, max block Lacerate builds again, so potentially it could be a goer for that, which makes it much easier to, you know, play melee builds. Replica Soul Taker doesn't exist. Starforge, which would drop off Shaper. This is going up to 450% from 300%. And I can tell you now that if you ran a heavy strike build with the built-in melee splash in the tree, and without having to specialize or put a gem into melee splash moving forwards, with such an increase in DPS with Trinity and speccing into elemental damage, this is actually going to be a reasonably good build, considering you could run an Enfeeble Aura to reduce all enemies sort of coming at you their damage, or you could run Temporal Chains Blasphemy Aura, and then that could slow all the enemies around you to allow you to do the strike damage you need, and then you get +2 strike as the influence mod on your gloves, and that could actually be really, really powerful, like super powerful. Same with you'd be able to play heavy strike, not glacial hammer with that one though, because you need a blunt. I think you need a blunt weapon for that. No one's going to play Varun Astra. Void Forge as well. This looks like it's been no longer has 36% increased physical damage. It now has gained 700%. Holy shit. 700% of weapon physical damage as extra random element from 300%. So that's a pretty big buff. Voltaxic Rift has been buffed as well. And for anyone who doesn't know, Voltaxic Rift actually used to be a Chaos Lightning conversion Spark item. So a lot of people used to play Voltaxic Rift Spark. And potentially this is showing me that that might be viable again, based on the just straight up buff. 100% of Lightning converted to Chaos. So you could play full Chaos Spark again, potentially. Mitigating monster life regeneration. Monster life regeneration has rarely significant issues. for players, but there does present an obstacle. There are a few solutions available. Yeah, this doesn't really affect the general play. This one does though. So strike skills and additional enemies. Most melee strikes are currently reliant on ways to strike extra targets or do melee splash. So basically with the melee, I think it was Trouble Fury. Yeah, Trouble Fury notable. Instead of doing an extra strike against one additional nearby target, you'll now be able to select to do melee splash, which is in like most games that are coming out now. They've actually updated POE so you can get melee splash in the tree itself, which sort of defeats the purpose of having a melee splash duel. But from pretty much any melee build moving forwards, this means doing single target and doing splash damage is viable for map clear and taking down bosses. It doesn't look like there's a damage reduction for having that melee splash as well, so it's actually really welcome to have this, because you could run Ancestral, I think it's Ancestral Call, and do the additional strikes on the actual gem setup, or you could run a +2 setup, influence implicit on your gloves, and that would also give you the ability, which comes at a little bit more expense, but that's going to give you the ability to hit 3 targets and then do huge amounts of splash damage, and then you can run a full 6-link setup like if you're a spellcaster, which is going to give you the high-end damage that you need, and or potentially allow you to get things like Fortify into your build and things like that, to be able to do more damage. And I think this is a really good change and in the right direction to fix melee. Now, Pious Path, I'm not sure what the overall outcome of this is going to be from regeneration on the Inquisitor, but yeah, I agree. The Inquisitor has been way too powerful for too many leagues. So they are taking away the 50% increased effect of Consecrated Ground, which isn't it's not a huge impact to the player, but you know, it is a little annoying. But hey, you know, we can't have everything. Spectral Helix and Lightning Conduit, yeah, we saw this one coming. Spectral Helix is a real like abused skill, especially like in late game and things like that. You see a lot of people playing it because you can just sort of drop it, sit in and just kills everything in a circle and minces bosses and everything. So that's been nerfed. I don't think it's like going to be a huge, like it's actually looks like it's a pretty significant nerf, to be honest with you, with Spectral Helix. Same with Lightning Conduit. This has been dropped down pretty significantly because that skill was just absolutely ridiculous. So like, I don't think you're going to be doing like 1-2 tapping early game anymore with Lightning Conduit. It's going to require a little bit more effort, but like it still does a lot of damage. So it's not going to do a lot of damage, but probably just going to need more investment to make that work, as opposed to put 2 Chaos in. Yeah, I know that's an extreme, but put 2 Chaos in and have an absolute slap of a skill that just destroys everything in the game. Now, Lightning Strike's another one. They haven't attacked the actual damage levels. They sort of have on the quality level, but they haven't really attacked the flat damage of Lightning Strike. So Lightning Strike itself is still a really powerful skill. They've just attacked the overall projectiles that it fires. So, and this is, I guess, makes sense because they're rebalancing melee. I know there's going to be a lot of upset people, but the reality is, like, you're still going to be able to get 2 additional projectiles from your Lightning Strike skill itself, and up to 7 at, so previously 4, yeah, so that this is a pretty big like reduction in clear speed for Lightning Strike, but you can still get the Helm enchant for it. So no quality on Divergent, yeah, so Divergent they've nerfed, and then the Helm enchant now has a value of 1 and 2, and 2 would be the Uber Lab, as opposed to 2 and 3. So it looks like you can cap out at 4 additional projectiles, and then you would just add like additional projectiles in the actual 6-link setup. To be honest with you, like that's not a huge problem considering how powerful Lightning Strike actually is. It's gonna nerf it a bit on the clear speed side, maybe, but you're still going to have a lot of damage in that build. And you know, anything that you're looking at playing as a league starter with Lightning Strike is going to be fine. I originally was thinking about recommending this one as league starter, though now looking at this is probably going to upset a lot of people, so maybe not. But anyway, I'll leave that to everybody to decide for themselves whether that's a significant enough nerf. Like, the damage is still going to be there, just not as much, you know, overarching clear speed as what it once was, or it's going to be much harder to get projectiles in, or you're going to have to take a little bit of a damage dip to be able to get more projectiles, which means switching out one gem for greater projectiles or lesser projectiles. You know, take your pick. Divergent second wind, let's be honest, nobody cares about that. Onslaught has been a buff and cannot be scaled by modifiers. Onslaught is now a buff. The modifiers to buff effects now affect Onslaught. That's a good change. I like that. Withering Step can no longer be used while already elusive. This change shouldn't affect builds that don't have ways to get it. Yeah, okay. Ancestor Totem, so added a new totem mastery, and this is what they were talking about in the Q&A, that provides Ancestor Totem buffs linger for 3 seconds. That's really like baity there, because basically what it's saying is you need to have totems to buff melee, and that's really annoying. I wish that they wouldn't put that, they wouldn't make melee skills so linked to stupid totems, but that means, like, if you drop your War Chief totem or you drop your Protector totem, then you're gonna have that buff for 3 more seconds than being in the range of the totem. So you can walk away and then have 3 seconds before you need to drop another totem. So that's not a bad thing necessarily. It makes it more pliable when mapping as well, because you're always moving. So maybe it's a good change. I think we need to steer away from that, but hey, it's a buff to melee, is a buff to melee. Tainted Orbs, this is really good. They've buffed the shit out of this. So it's gone back to the more favorable option that it once was in Scourge League, which means, you know, probability of a 6-link within 15 tainted orbs of fusing, which means we can 6-link items a fuckload easier, and I like this change, and I welcome this change. Fractured Orbs, Fracturing Orb, yeah, this is to basically fracture items. I like this. This is going to be really cool currency to play with, and it's target farmable of Harbinger. So yeah, that's really good. And it makes Harbinger a viable reason to farm as well. Similar to Tainted Orbs now, if you want to target farm Scourge Link content, which is the, what was it? I can't remember what it's called anymore. They recoined it last league. Then, you know, you can do that now, get Tainted Orbs, and you're actually going to get a return beyond. It's called Beyond. So you could run Beyond maps and actually get a return out of that moving forwards and be able to 6-link gear a lot more easily. Corrupted gear, that is, but hey, no issue there. Saurus Arena, pardon me, has been adjusted. Bestiary, party play. Yeah, not really a big impact on most people because most of us are loners. No real disadvantages to rogue markers not being guaranteed drops from Act 6. Kirak League mods, yeah, so these have just been changed, and as you can see, Harbinger's in there, Beyond's in there, so, you know, based on what I just said, Fractured Orbs and Fusing's going to probably be worth a decent amount of currency this league because of the actual craftables that come from them, so, you know, touch wood, tap on nose, might be worth actually target farming that stuff this league. Quest changes, yeah, this doesn't really affect us. This happens every league, so I'm not worried about this. They did add some UI changes to make it a little, just some overall quality of life sort of things. They've given us new slots into the currency stash tabs for Fracturing Orbs and the associated shards. Yeah, so, and Divine Vessels, we no longer have to go and talk to what's-his-face. We can just right-click on the Divine Vessel, and it'll just do its thing, and apply it to the Pantheon, which I really like, because I used to hate having to track him down to go cash in my Divine Vessel to get my Pantheon power, so that really sucked. Heap of bug fixes. It just looks like they've really spent a lot of time amending the game and making the corrections that needed to be corrected. And you know what? I really like it. I think they've done a really good job with this league so far, from what we've seen. And then obviously they spoke about the whole conversation about drop rates and everything. And I agree with that. I made a fair bit of currency last league and whatnot. I think the problem with last league was the league mechanic itself was just really lackluster. And then obviously Archnem and the way that was approached really just shit the bed. But I think with all the changes they made around Archnem and all the changes they made with the overall game itself in this league, the league mechanic looks pretty interesting and it looks like it could be challenging. Buffing up melee from what we can see, buffing up other skills, buffing up curses. It's just a league of buffs mainly. There's so few nerfs, and I know people will get upset about the few nerfs that do exist, like in Lightning Strike or Lightning Conduit. But the reality is, like, those skills were just absolutely ridiculous anyway, and most people were playing them. And there's so many skills in the game that do work really well. So there's no reason not to play other skills. Anyway, yeah, that's my take on the patch notes. Obviously, I'll put a link in the description. Make sure you follow the channel, follow the Twitch. I'll be putting out my usual cycle of videos for League Start. So yes, I've been working on a curation. There's no real like heavy nerfs to skills at this stage. From what I can see, it's more so buffs than nerfs and some changes to the tree. And then decreasing the damage of monsters and increasing the effect of curses to bosses. So it seems like this league's going to be a pretty good league. So yeah, anyway, I'll have a video out later tonight. But I thought I'd do a patch notes video this morning, get this out before I head to work. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. And yeah, until then, bye.